Welcome. My name is Victoria. This is my lovely puppy, Alfie. He's overdue for a haircut. I'm a registered clinical counselor and I live in beautiful British Columbia. You can see a little bit of it in the background. And I'd like to talk to you today about self-attunement. It's actually a framework that I'd like to introduce to you that we can sort of move into the concept of self-love. I do have challenges around people just propagating the idea you should love yourself. What does that mean? Because love is a verb, love is a noun, it conveys an emotion, it's a feeling, but it can be understood subjectively in many, many different ways by everyone differently. Each one of us probably knows a person who loves somebody and yet sometimes do not such nice things to them, right? So feeling love for somebody does not mean actually that we act always in a very loving ways. Let's put it this way. And that's where the framework of self-attunement can come in, because unlike the concept of self-love, attunement requires actually very specific concrete steps that you can master and practice by applying it to yourself. So that's the concept of self-attunement. And through that, you can foster a really strong feeling of self-worth and, yes, ultimately self-love. Now, I want to maybe step back for a second and talk about what attunement is. Well, you saw my puppy over here. He's reseated in the background now. But attunement is something that we often can observe be applied to somebody like a child, a baby, or even a dog, right? So Alfie, he cannot talk and he doesn't have buttons to press at the moment, but he has needs. He has needs that he tries in his own way to express. And I have to pay pretty close attention to his nonverbals to figure out what he needs, whether he wants to go to the toilet or a drink or water or pets, comfort, those kind of things. So that's me, the action of me seeing him, paying attention to him, and being curious and wanting to understand what he wants is attunement. I'm practicing attunement towards him. You might have a child or a baby that you practice attunement towards to, or a cat, or any other animal. So that's what attunement is. And so we can turn that inwards and begin to pay attention to our needs. And that's where that self-attunement comes in. We can also look at concept of attunement, or even how much attunement you have received yourself growing up through another framework, the 5 languages of love. If you're familiar with Dr. Chapman, who developed the 5 languages of love, developed this framework for looking at the differences between how people feel loved in terms of what actions do they interpret as loving towards self, and how they like to show love towards someone. And that's often influenced by their experience or how they received love growing up. And so that might be based on specific actions that a parent has shown them that they experienced as loving. So for example, if a child grew up in an environment where a parent maybe primarily have shown love through acts of service, which is like actions, they'll cook lunch for them, they'll do their laundry, I don't know, they'll help them organize their room. So some sort of action, that would be as a child, they felt loved. Then as they grow up, they will maybe show love to somebody through those acts of service and perhaps like to receive love in that way. Not always that's how it works, but that's often the framework for it. And so often there might be 1 or 2 of these love languages that are predominant. But let me list, in case you have never come across this area, let me tell you what those love languages are. So the first one is words of affirmation. That's somebody complimenting you, cherishing you, giving you praise, that kind of thing. Then we have quality time. Quality time would involve spending some time together, doing some sort of activities. It could be anything from watching TV to, I don't know, playing games and doing sports together. That would qualify as quality time. My lighting is just going in and out with the sun in the back there. Bear with me. Then we have acts of service, which I already have mentioned. That's actionable things that we can do to help somebody. Receiving gifts. So perhaps a parent was very busy during their day or just working a lot, and so they might convey the attention to the child for giving them gifts. Sometimes it could be lavish gifts. But gift giving can also shown in most smaller gestures, like going, if you're in a grocery store and you see a chocolate bar your child loves and you pick that up, that could be also constituting as a gift giving, a thoughtful gift. And the last one is physical touch. That could be a hug, holding hands, any kind of physical comfort, cuddling, things like that. Those are the 5 languages of Dr. Chapman described that we have. Many people now, and many professionals and in general, people use this language like, my love language is this. What's your love language? This is the interesting bit. When I reflected on it further, through the lens of the needs we have and attunement, when we think about a child growing up, which one of these languages would you say is not important? Is it not important for a child to hear how wonderful they are and that they are important to you and that they have made you proud? Is it not important to spend quality time with your child and do activities with them? Is it not important to do acts of service for them and do something that's going to count for them? Is it not important for them to receive gifts? And I'm talking about thoughtful, to be small things, right? That will specify special attention from you. And then, is it not important for a child to receive physical touch? I don't know about you, but to me, they all feel quite important. It's a very well-rounded experience for a child to receive all of that and to feel important for all of these gestures and means. And that would foster a really strong sense of self-worth in them and a sense of love, that they are loved, seen, and heard. Now, if you have not received some of these love languages growing up, that is totally okay. That does not mean your parents did not love you. They love you very much. I just want to be very clear. This is not to throw stones at our parents. They might have just not known that this such love language exists. They might have not received themselves. They've not have capacity or ability to communicate that love language to you. That is totally okay. And nothing is lost, because we can actually learn these love languages as adults. And we can learn them and apply them to ourselves through this self-attunement piece that I have mentioned. Oh, let me move a little bit away from that sun. This is very bright. This is all right. Let's think about special effects, okay? Special effects. That's what I put in there. A halo. So if some of these languages, love languages, are like unfamiliar territory to you, for example, like physical touch is not something you like necessarily gravitate to, never been hugged kind of experience from childhood, that's where we see that maybe a gap. Now, you might not necessarily feel or recognize it as a gap. A part of you, like maybe feels that way from younger, but maybe not. Regardless of that, if we want to foster that sense of self-love that that many of us hear about on the internet, you gotta love yourself, especially if you're into dating, that message is really strong. Well, I want to offer you concrete steps you can take towards creating the feeling of self-love for the practice of self-attunement. And we would practice that self-attunement through those love languages. to be able to apply those love languages that we talked about, where we would internally apply them. We would have words of affirmation, we would praise and celebrate our steps forward. We would spend quality time with ourselves, do things that are important and valuable to us. We would do acts of service, like take care of ourselves, get ourselves to bed on time, cook healthy food, exercise, things like that. We would give ourselves small gifts, small tokens of appreciation for ourselves. And we would involve physical touch, whether it's actually we can create that ourselves through self-hug, cuddling with an animal. But if you feel safe and comfortable asking for another loved one to give you a hug and experience that, can work for maybe some discomforts around it. Mention another thing, that actually to begin the first step of applying these love languages towards yourself, the first actually fundamental steps is to see thyself. What do I mean? Before a parent can come in and give the child those love languages, the parent has to see the child. They have to physically see them, but also emotionally see them. How are you? What's happening for you? How are you feeling? What's going on? Right? So this is where maybe in the past it has been difficult to apply those love languages to yourself, if you ever tried, is that you have to first check in with yourself. How are you feeling? What's going on for you? Maybe name some of the feelings you're feeling. What do you need? Do you need some comfort? Do you need some reassurance? Do you need some problem solving, right? So asking yourself as if you were listening to a little child without judgment or criticism, okay? So that's the first step in this process. Seeing yourself, hearing yourself, turning towards yourself. And then beginning to recognize the bigger needs, the quality time, the gifts, the acts of service. What else do I need to do in everyday life to communicate that worth to myself in the way I care for myself? Just like we care for our loved animals, I'm just petting my dog Alfie here, or our children. We are just, taking care of ourselves is just as important, and loving ourselves just as important. In my future videos, I will go further into detail of practicing self-attunement. I recognize that my suggestions in today's session can be easily applied by some of you, and some of you might still have quite a bit of challenge. It really depends on the gaps you might have experienced in your childhood as to how easy some of these things to transition into your life and maybe not. I maybe want to end on a note where I would say that if you have experienced many of these languages in your childhood and you're not novice to them, that I would say it's actually a really great privilege. Most of our parents have grew up in a very different environments, with different standards, with different level of knowledge about childhood upbringing back then. Just being different generation. And so many of them have their own gaps in how they've been raised and what they can give to their children. So that's totally okay. That's part of life. So I do consider growing up with a parent who's very attuned to you and is able to speak those languages is like a really big privilege. I know that in our society right now, we do talk about privilege, and there's the white privilege, which is totally exists and it's a real thing. There's the beauty privilege, there is male privilege, there's all sorts of privileges, and they are true. I'm not a denier of anything. However, there's a really important privilege that is a little bit overlooked, which is the privilege of receiving really good attunement in childhood and feeling deeply loved by your parent and knowing there is always somebody to catch me. I think if you experience that privilege, you get to be that lucky to have had that in childhood. You move for the world in a very different way. And even if you encounter discrimination and other challenges, this foundation makes you so much more resilient to it. And we also, like, we can see that in examples where people might actually have privilege, like being white and male and tall, and yet still suffer a lot inside because they did not have the privilege of loving, attuned, and bringing. An example that comes to my mind is Anthony Bourdain, right? He's kind of, from external standpoint of view, a representation of ultimate privilege in our society: male, white, tall, successful. And yet he has been battling his demons for the longest time. And, you know, none of that matters if you don't have that sense of worth and love inside of you. So I think that's just important to keep in mind. And the important good thing as well is for us to know that we can foster that sense of love and worth in ourselves through doing that self-attunement. So just because we didn't get to be born with privilege, we can create it to some extent in our life. We're not powerless or helpless here. And I'm going to continue showing up here and supporting me on this journey. I really appreciate you listening to me today. I'd like to hear your thoughts, comments. I do invite respectful language in the comments below. But it was, Alfie says bye as well, and I'll see you next video. Ciao.